Thank you, Dr. Mike, for your time. I'm excited to welcome you to the S&C Roundtable. I haven't done a podcast in quite a bit of time, so I've been waiting for the right guest, and Jack has been feeding me lots of interesting stories and interesting information about yourself. And as one of the co-founders of Track Speed Development, I've been working through Acceleration Monster the last about 6 weeks or 5 weeks, whenever the program came out. And that's been a ton of fun. And my glutes feel like they're about to fall off my ass, literally. Like the sacral glute fibers just feel like they've just been torn. And I'm told that I should be able to recover a lot better from this stuff, but it's beating me up for sure. So now I'm really enjoying that. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you today. Jack's mentioned to me you have quite an interesting resume, and being a lecturer at ACU, Australian Catholic University, and you're currently studying your PhD, but you're also a sprint coach at Track Speed Development. So for those who don't know who you are and haven't been formally introduced to you, if they haven't heard you on a podcast before, I'd just like for you to kind of introduce yourself to the listeners, and so they can get a little bit more insight into your background.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me on. And anything Jack's told you is a lie about me, so don't listen to anything he says. No, so I guess a bit of a background. Started off exercise science, finishing school, not knowing what I wanted to do. Potentially going to do a trade. Ended up staying at uni, but doing a whole bunch of different sort of courses that were electrical technology and construction and all that sort of stuff, which sort of feeds into some of my hands-on stuff that I do and build and make. Ended up going to uni to do exercise science, thinking sort of physio route or something like that. Wasn't sort of sold on physio. Did my master's of ex-phys instead. That was sort of emerging, 10 over 12 years ago. And yeah, sort of finished off PhD a few years ago. When was that? That was 2018. I think I finished PhD. It was in neurological rehab, which is quite different to what I've always done, which is sort of been in sports and teams and coached and sort of performance. Ended up doing neurological rehab, which I think has probably been one of the best learning experiences for gait and analyzing gait and things like that, which came full circle into track speed development. So I lecture at uni full time, and part time is coaching track speed development with obviously Jack and Louis. So there's sort of three of us in the team, and we all have different experiences, different sort of unique sort of strengths and weaknesses. We all have our weaknesses, but I was sort of sitting in that rehab just with my ex-phys background, more that rehab side of things. So when people get injured, they unfortunately have to see me, which sucks for them. But yeah, that's sort of a little bit about me. In terms of the academic stuff, my dad said to me at one point, you got more degrees than a compass, but you still don't know where you're going. That was probably a pretty accurate description back then. So yeah, a bunch of uni degrees, but I think what I've always done, which I'm happy about, is not a traditional academic who doesn't really get the practical stuff happening. I've always either worked with people, PTing or coaching. I coached at a school for nearly 8 years in a billion different sports, but ended up mostly in athletics. Yeah, I think that just plays a huge role in solidifying what you learn at uni. And everyone always has a go at uni about, oh, you don't learn enough and they don't teach you the practical stuff. And it's fair, there's a lot of theory, and we probably have it wrong in terms of, if you do a trade, you go to TAFE once a week and you learn 4 days a week or 5 days a week on the site. And I think that is important. But I think sort of the better students are out there working as well at the same time, and just makes everything more applied. It's hard to apply anatomy when you're learning it from a textbook as opposed to when you're training in the gym. And I think that's, or doing the Acceleration Monster program, feeling your glutes working. So I think that makes a big difference with the art of studying anyway.
Definitely. Yeah, you have to do it. You have to experience it yourself. I think if you're not doing that, then I think there's a serious disconnect between what you're learning in the classroom. 100%. I'm interested to hear about, like, have you always been involved in sprint coaching, or because Jack mentioned to me there was a bit of a comeback to kind of or maybe the law, the forming of track speed development. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
quite interesting.
so I actually first started getting into track and field coaching. It was more so to help my poor mum out. So mum ended up being little athletics age manager. And my mum has no idea. She's not athletic, she's strong and used to beat me up, but that's a different story. Um, no, but she had no idea about track and field. She had no idea, but ended up being an age manager. So then she had to go to a course to learn. She said, I better learn how to, people to throw. We were kids. It was only young. We were only young. So, how to throw shot put, how to do this. So anyway, I ended up going, well, I should probably help mum out. So I was reading the books with her and trying to learn how to be a coach. And that was it, I was before 15 or maybe 12 or 13, something silly like that. So I was always interested in track and field. I played soccer at a high level as a kid. Ended up hating soccer. It was just too many people faking injuries and rolling around. So then I just did track and field. Then made a late switch to rugby league at 17. I was pretty quick. Never that quick, but quick enough for rugby league anyway. Made a switch to rugby league and sort of went that way. But the whole track and field was always a passion. So every university topic I could possibly do, I was doing a study in track and field at some point. So other sports, for some reason, always kept getting drawn back to track and field. I think just because it's such a pure sport. And it's this pursuit of perfection that everyone goes for. It's like trying to get something so simple, so right. As opposed to team sports, you can hide around and sort of avoid things. So I was getting into coaching, and like I said, I was coaching at a school for many years, and I started to get into the whole Athletics Australia and getting involved, and just had some horrible encounters with some I guess some very well known coaches. And I just thought, well, and it was weird because I was studying at the same time. So I thought my scientific principles were pretty sound. My practical principles were pretty sound as an 18-year-old sort of getting into coaching. But yeah, I was just severely turned off by the people who were in there and some of the egos and things like that are associated with it. And I was always that person saying, well, why are you doing it that way? And no one could ever give me an answer. They just said, oh, it's just how we do it. And I'm like, yeah, but why are you doing these drills? Do they actually translate to performance? And all these things that, looking back now, I was just questioning everything because nothing made sense. And to be honest, a lot of it still doesn't make sense in the track and field world. But hopefully we can actually prove some of them wrong or prove some of them right. But yeah, so that kind of actually turned me off because I got some really bad experiences and sort of encounters. I kept coaching. I was still coaching, but I never really got involved with the whole industry, I guess you could say. And then probably when was it about? So I was coaching all the way through, but then things started to get a little bit more serious when a good friend of mine, sports physio Philina, he's actually finishing off his PhD over in Ireland, but he's Sri Lankan background. And there was this opportunity to do some work with the Sri Lankan Olympic Committee. There was a workshop that they had done in Australia that I had presented on that they liked, and they sort of said, look, can you come over and do some stuff over there? So we went over, both him and I, and presented over there to a bunch of their Olympic coaches and things like that. So that sort of reignited that whole, actually, this is really good, this is really enjoyable, this is really fun. And then they ended up sending one of their athletes over to Australia to prepare for the Com Games in 2018 up in the Gold Coast. And it was sort of you've got a year to train this person. We're going, great, a year, that's awesome. Got to 6 months, we're calling the government going, well, I wasn't calling the government, but
the story sounds better for you calling the government.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
what line do you even ring for that? No, go on.
well, ironically, they were actually calling me specifically, but that's a different. I'll get to that. But yeah, so they sort of said, yep, okay, we'll send her out 6 months before, and I'm going, oh, geez, that's pushing it. 6 months to get someone ready for a comp, and no communication with the coaches, no idea what she's doing, if she's had any injuries, nothing really. ends up getting 6 months, still nothing. Then we kind of go, well, what's going on? Anyway, 3 months before Commonwealth Games, they send her out. And they go, well, you got to make her faster now. She hasn't been running fast and all these things. And we're going, are you kidding me? So it was Theelina, who's sports physio, awesome, one of the best physios ever. It was myself and Elliot Taylor, who's an S&C. He's at a private school around the corner here, but awesome S&C. So it was a good group of us working together. Put together sort of a plan for the next 12 weeks, and we said, well, what do you do in 12 weeks? You got an elite performer who isn't performing. So she was the Asian Games gold medalist for the 200 and 100. And yeah, sort of coming to us underperforming, and then us to change everything around for Commonwealth Games. And it's like, all right, here we go. So anyway, we had a plan, and the first thing that sort of popped up was she was just so undercooked in terms of she stopped running longer reps. So she was entering into the 200 when really she should have been entering into the 100 with sort of the training she'd been doing coming into it. So speed endurance and sort of the back end of her 200 wasn't good enough. So like, well, can we do a little stint of some sort of endurance-y stuff just to try to spark something, and then go into Com Games with a little bit more endurance, speed endurance. That was the plan anyway, because we're going, you can't go in the way you're going in because you're not going to run well. So we so there was a whole bunch of competitions leading up to Com Games that we had targeted to run into, and she was going to run in them, but run under fatigue. So the performances we knew weren't going to be great, but we had to train. Like, it's not the time to be trying to change and adapt, but we had to, because it's like, you're not going to perform well in Com Games if we don't. So we ended up doing all these comps, and her times weren't that great. And that's when the government's calling us going, well, we're pulling her out of the Commonwealth Games. She's not training anymore. You're not doing your job and this and that. We're like, well, just calm down, all this sort of stuff. Anyway, there was a competition that we had flagged that was just before she flew up to the Gold Coast to compete. And it was in Sydney. And we all said, well, this is it. Like, it's either going to happen now or we're all sort of done and dusted. Anyway, she ended up PBing in the 100 meters, which was fantastic. So there was some method in our madness. 200 still wasn't great. And this is sort of where some of the data analytics comes into it that we've started developing with Louis and his research.
Is that with the GPS tracker, the GPS?
Yeah, a little bit of that, but we didn't have it at that time. That's sort of what sparked the idea of we need a better way to do in-race analysis to come up with a better way, a race strategy for this person. So the race strategy, what I mean by that is she was running the 200 and opening up so fast that it was just absolutely cooking her for the next 100. So the first 100 versus the second 100. And you could visually see it, but how to quantify it was a little bit different. We were doing split times through video and things like that. But the point was that she had run fast in a 100 just before leaving, but the 200 still wasn't there yet. And, it's probably she just wasn't fit enough. If it's not a great word to use, but ready for the 200. So she wasn't 200 ready. So anyway, so again, another pretty bold call that ended up paying off, which was lucky. It's a bit of luck, a bit of race strategy, but essentially, so in the heat of the 200, and I was telling the coach, you have to tell her. So she couldn't speak English, and I said, and the coach's English was quite broken. You have to tell her not to run fast from the start. I go, she can't come out fast because she will have nothing in the end. So it's like, you've got a certain amount of energy you can expend, or NOS, if you want to do a car sort of analogy. And it's like, you can't do it at the start. You've got to wait for the end, and
too soon, Junior. That's it.
Pretty much.
You should have showed her Fast and the Furious. She would have realized.
Yeah. Should have, Vin Diesel, RX-7. But no, like I think it was interesting, because from the data that we had, we could make those decisions and go, you're going quicker in the first 100 by a second, but you're losing 3 seconds in the next one, or something like that. So it's like, well, if you don't gain a second, but you maybe stay on par, do you not lose 3? So it's about where, where do you want to lose more? And if you go out too hard, you cook yourself, sort of thing. So essentially developed a race strategy or a race model for her to perform her best at her current capacity. And I think that's the important part. Anyway, so she didn't go out too hard, which was great in the 200, and ended up running a PB. So it's like, you know, someone who wasn't in the shape that probably should have been for the 200 ended up running a PB purely because we sort of just prioritized how she should run it. So anyway, it was sort of like a pretty good moment for all three of us to go, well, we put in these plans that probably shouldn't have worked that late in the game, but they did, and they paid off. So then, the sort of the Sri Lankan Olympic Committee thought we were gurus and heroes, and it was really good because it paid off. But it was just funny that just the whole thing around it about, send us so late and then having a go at us for not performing. It's like, so tough to deal with, but then ended up getting the result. So, but that sort of sparked the track and field, and I had matured as a I wasn't an 18-year-old coach, sort of being put off by other people's egos and things like that. And I just thought, well, actually, maybe this is something to have a crack at. And that's sort of when, track speed development started a little bit later, but it ended up starting, I think, peak COVID or just before lockdown, which is probably not a great time to start a business. But, that sort of started off, and then Jack had his squad with Metamorphosis Track Project. And there was a few people who crossed over in terms of, I was teaching one of his athletes at uni. He was doing his Master of Ex-Phys, and then it was just quite an interesting thing because no one really knew who I was or what I had done at all in track and field, because I'd kind of keep to myself and don't really talk about too much. But then sort of we ended up merging and creating Track Speed Development, and bringing on Louis as a coach as well. And Louis doing honors with me at ACU. I think it's all just a really good group of people who are interested in track and field, in speed, in coaching, and I think the applied side of the science, because I think that's something that's really lacking in track and field. It's practical things that can actually change performance. So I think that probably summarizes how we all started. I think a bit of a history there. I think that's not too bad. I'll talk underwater, so you just have to shut me up when I wouldn't.
That was great, Mike. No, great. I think a lot of people will get a really good understanding of where you are and a little bit about your background as well, which they probably won't get if they just see the Adam Meakin's posts on Instagram and stuff like that. But no, it's really good to kind of get your perspective on how that evolved. When you talk about the application of some of the things that you're learning or some of the things that you're discovering through sports science, what are some of the things that you think, or what are some of the directions you're pushing that towards? Whereas, maybe some people are, I don't know, maybe they're being fooled by some of the data, or maybe they're not applying it as well as you think they could be. What are some of the examples that you can give to us, or provide a bit of context around that?
I think the biggest thing for me in track and field initially anyway, was people would always say, "Oh, that looks better," and that's good. And you're going, I don't really care what it looks like. Did they get from A to B faster? And if they did, well, then that's a good thing. It may not look great, but hey, did it actually work? And timing gates are a university-only thing, this is back then, very expensive, very hard to set up, very hard to get the data. So coaches were limited at the time to use a stopwatch. And, people are still using stopwatches and claiming PBs and saying, "Oh, you ran a PB for that 10-meter split." And I'm going, like, the error of the gold standard device is bigger than something. Anyway, like people were making decisions and saying things based on stuff that had no data to actually prove anything. So that was part of the problem, because people keep going, "Oh, that looks better," but anything that made sense to go, yeah, that was actually better. So I think it was more so that frustrated me the most, in terms of there was no data. It was very much a subjective thing. a coach's eye. And I think that's the part that it's not that I disagree with a lot of the coaching stuff and the coaching eye, but then I'm going, but if it's not being backed up by your science and some of the numbers, well, then you can't say what you're saying. And it's this huge confirmation bias in terms of, oh, that looks better, so it must be better.
Like a poor
It's like the
understanding
same,
or a poor application of like a technical model. Like that technical model kind of just has to have a few key features or how many key features you guys value. And then there is a lot of things that don't, like, yeah, how it looks, the aesthetic of it. Like there might be a ton of lateral movement as someone brings their swing leg through. Like my left side is like properly cocked up through the left side of my body. But yeah, that's just an example. But you see a ton of lateral movement or whatever it might be. People stepping out of lane and things like that, and they're extremely fast. And
I think that's where people like, you know, he's an interesting character, someone like an Adarian Barr or something like that. Not that I agree with all methods, but I don't agree with everyone on everything anyway. But you know what I do like is some of the stuff talking about. You know, it was very much a textbook run of Carl Lewis. You have to run with this technique. You have to run like that. And it's like, I guess he was probably one of the first to sort of go, well, do you though? Like, maybe not. Have a look at this person. They're running pretty quick and they're not running the same. So it was very much a whole, you have to run this way, and everyone would follow just that way to do it. And it's like, there was no other way apparently to do it. And not that he's the only one to ever say that maybe that's not the only way. I think it's kind of gone off on a bit of a tangent with his stuff, but you know, that whole approach of this is the only way you can run. You have to run Charlie Francis either high or low. You can't do anything in between. It's impossible to ever get results. And it's like, you know, those philosophies and coaching that if there's no other evidence or science behind it, you can't ever challenge it. You can't ever say, actually, maybe that's not completely entirely correct. So that's where the whole, if it doesn't look pretty, it's not good. And it's like, well, you know, Ben Johnson didn't actually look that great. He didn't look like Carl Lewis, but he kept beating him. So obviously there was some other supplementation and things going on. But
we don't have to talk about that. Yeah.
but I'm sure they all were anyway. So it's an even playing field. But yeah, and I think being able to use some of that data all the time makes a big difference. And that's something. So fast forward now where you've got different timing systems. They're not super reliable, but free laps seem to be a popular one now that everyone can use. We've had horrible success with them, but you know, there's some people have success. We haven't. But we actually use our timing gates. We've got we designed some radar infrared timing gates where athletes will run through. It beeps a time, and they can see their time straight away on the screen, essentially. But little things like that go a huge way in terms of that is actually better. It's like going into a gym, and this is the problem with track and field, is going into a gym and never counting your weights. You know, and you go, well, did you lift more this session or not? And it's like, I don't know. I look better lifting it. And it's like, yeah, but was it more or not? You know, and it's such a stupid thing to say, but that's what track and field is, and not is, but now it's changing purely because of technological changes. Because unless you had timing gates, how would you know that run was better, that rep was better, that you'd have to wait until a competition. You go, oh, my 100 was worse because my time was worse. But it's like, but that doesn't mean that your start was worse. That could mean your middle or end or wherever it was worse. So it's just not having any visibility on anything. You have a start and end time, and that's it. And at training, you pretty much had no times unless it was hand time, which could be out by God knows how much. So, you know, I think I don't know what I was talking about now. What were we talking about?
Just like application of sports science for track and field, yeah. So you're seeming to go down the path of like you have a patent on a algorithm for GPS, and I looked at that kind of data from Mark, one of our shared clients, and he just kind of finished. He did two races, both weekends, and the data from both races, and you could see like the time it takes for him to get to max velocity, and then that like drop off, you know, around that 80 meter mark.
So part of the whole timing gates and everything is good, like being able to time things in certain segments and intervals, but that doesn't help us in race. And I think that was the biggest sort of thing to solve, is, well, how do people run a race and where are they actually changing? Because it's like I said, if you have a start time and a finish time, that doesn't give you any detail in terms of how they actually ran that race. So the GPS is, again, something that every team sport has and everyone's using. And the idea was, well, it was quite a few years ago, and I spoke to a friend of mine who's Fabian is actually the head of the Socceroos sports science, or head of performance there. So super smart, switched on German bloke, and we sort of started mucking around with GPS units in terms of how can we actually get the data accurately enough, because team sports don't really care that much about was it this close or that close, because they're running for 90 minutes. So if they're out by a meter, big deal. Whereas, if we're out by a meter, that changes everything for us in track and field. So started off there and had an honours student who was working on it at the time. He didn't finish it off. He sort of got halfway through, and then Louis, who's with us at Track Speed Development, took the project and really ran with it. And he's just done an awesome job in sort of getting everything ready and sorted. And so we're using really sort of the team sport GPS units weren't great, and I had an issue with them because you had to buy, just to export raw data, which sounds silly, but to export raw data you had to buy the full system, which is $10,000 a year and all this other stuff. So it's like, this is equipment that people can't use. No coach can, well, I mean, some coaches can afford that. We certainly can't. So it's like, well, how do we get people to actually use data to make better decisions when they're training? And that's the biggest issue in track and field, is no one's using data to make decisions unless they have access to it. And we're talking about like the laser or radar guns that are $20,000. Who has money for that? No one. We're talking about dual beam timing systems like your Swift or Valve, just, they've got their one, or it used to be Fusion. They're not cheap. They were up near the $20,000. So, but still, none of that can actually be used in a race. So with these really high frequency GPS units that we've got, and sort of the software that we've been developing, and Louis, part of his research, has done a great job in getting it there. Some engineers along the way who trained with us, and one who's a aeronautical engineer, so he's a rocket scientist essentially. Helping build this software to then just get the raw data, chuck it into this, and get these awesome reports for clients like Mark to go, oh yeah, I can see that I can hold on really well, but maybe I'm not accelerating hard enough. So it's like, okay, well, straight away you need to accelerate to get to your max speed, because you're sort of not really you sort of just comes out of the blocks nice and easy. So little things like that a coach, I think a coach's eye can see. I think a good coach can kind of go, actually, yeah, you're missing that, but then how do you actually track whether they're getting better at it or changing and things like that? Because they might get a faster time, but still not accelerate better. They might just be not fatiguing as much or hit a higher top speed or whatever it is. So that GPS stuff is pretty cool. We're hoping to sort of get some software online soon, fingers crossed, that will make it accessible for coaches to actually use and get reports and get data and just make better decisions in track and field.
So that would be in conjunction with a lot of the laser timing stuff. You would, if you're in training in a scenario, would you use the two things together? Like ideally, would you say wear this, or would you just do one or the other? Like how accurate is the GPS? I know you said you got it down from like, it's not a meter, not like a team sport one. It's a lot more accurate.
Yeah. So from some of the pilot data anyway that we've done and mucked around with, it's almost bang on, like exactly the same as if you're looking at means and standard deviations of them. But I still think they have different utilities. I still think the GPS is probably a better race analysis tool. So I think being able to wear it in comp and get data in a comp, because training speeds and sort of comp speeds can be completely different. Some people, run much far, and most people run much faster when there's a bit of adrenaline and competition. Some people do the opposite. They actually train better than they race, and they sort of choke up in races. So I think having that data from the GPS is important. It's a bit different. So what we've implemented with our guys, and we do our max speed stuff on a Monday, for example, our 60 meters sort of max speed stuff. We have the times there, and everyone can see them. And it's a bit, I guess, a bit controversial. Some people say, "Oh, you shouldn't overload them with data and shouldn't give them numbers all the time because they overthink it," which I agree. You have paralysis by analysis. But I also say, well, if you give it to them for long enough, do they just get used to it? And then it just becomes a part of the training cycle. And I think that's essentially what's happened now. It took a while because people go, "Oh, that was slower, that was this." And it's like, do it for long enough and everyone gets used to it. Just like you get used to lifting weights in a gym, when you put a 20 and a 20 on, you know what it is. And I think there's still clinical utility of having instantaneous numbers and feedback for the athlete to go, "Oh, that was on, that was quick." It's just like regular monitoring of your weights and doing, instead of doing a 1 RM all the time, you kind of go, "Well, I lifted 3 for more, or I did my 3 RM for 10." So it's like, okay, well, obviously you're stronger now. So similar to that concept, but I think there's a combo of both probably still needs to be done until the GPS is good enough, and the software, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to go into it to make it as instantaneous. Because now it's still a bit, you've got to download the data, process the data, and spit out the report. But eventually, I think you'll get there in terms of live data recording and live, and GPS is definitely doing it. But I think, baby steps, maybe. Baby steps will get there eventually.
You're a bit of an entrepreneur. You've got the GPS going, and then I didn't realize, but you're also Mr. Pay on Health. That's also another venture.
Yeah, so that's me and my brothers, actually. So that's all three of
that's
us.
Awesome.
So we started off going, obviously with my background in sort of where I'm at, and they're sort of in accounting and business and finance and all the other stuff, which I'm terrible at. They sort of said, "Well, why don't we start something different and something a bit niched?" And again, probably not another one great to start. We just started before COVID sort of hit again, but anyway, it also started after PhD finished. So I was bored. I was walking around in circles. I've always had far too much energy and don't sleep enough. But so we started off Pay on Health. So Pay on represents a god of the physicians in Greek mythology. So someone who would help heal and he was the physician for the gods. So we started that up, and that sort of spun. It's spun off, and we've all got full-time jobs. So this is things on the side, something that we enjoy. And both my brothers are in, like I said, accounting and finance, and it was quite odd because we started off doing the small stuff. So bands, triggers, and some of the stuff that actually someone said to me, "Oh, I want your elbow. Like, it feels like your elbow triggering me." And I said, "Well, I wonder if I can replicate that." So I actually sent some dimensions of my elbow to my mate, and he catted it up for me, and I started 3D printing it. And I said, "Well, this is getting the right size of my elbow," and then got it, manufactured in rubber and all the rest of it. So they're on sale. So it's actually called the elbow, and it's my elbow. So if you want to, my elbow is a trigger, you can have it. So it sort of started all these little spin-offs there, and the flywheel, which is a freaking awesome tool. I think we should be using much more of that in training for power and speed. But building my own flywheel with a bunch of bearings, and it kind of all stems back to, I think, the creative nature, and me just being pretty practical with my hands, sort of going, well, I might either do a trade or I might do something in sport. I'm not sure yet. And I've sort of always been either building or fixing cars, or building go-karts when I was in year 10, 11, and things like that. That all sort of comes back to, I don't know what I should have done in my life, but I probably should have been doing something in the building trade. Would have been more successful, or would have made more money, definitely, at the way things are going in Australia. But I think just being able to do all that stuff hands-on and being a bit creative is just something different, and you might not do every day. My brothers, like I said, they're in accounting, and we started doing gym fit outs. So we're doing full gym fit outs from bottom up, and got some tradie mates helping and things like that. We built some decent gyms. And it was hilarious because I thought my brothers, I'm like, oh, they're sporty and fit and all the rest of it. But I'm like, they really want to be building on a Sunday, because we'd pull massive shifts from finish work at 6 and then go till 4 a.m. the next day trying to put flooring down and rigs up and painting gyms. And I go, do they really want to do that? And they were loving it because it's like it's not sitting at a desk.
The
They can
opposite.
stand back. Well, it's like there's something about being able to step back and go, hey, I built that. I think there's some sort of satisfaction about that sometimes when you're just replying to emails online constantly or doing Excel sheets, which is all they do, which, there's just nothing satisfying. Oh, I don't think it's satisfying. So I think just the fact that they got out there and could actually do something, I think it's good. It's a good excuse to hang out with them as well, which is another thing as you get a bit older and they've got kids as well. It's sort of you don't get time to hang out as much, so we go, we've got to go to work, so we're all working together and putting gyms together and having a laugh. So definitely some entrepreneurial stuff there. I think it comes from just sheer boredom. I get bored really quick, so I've got to do something different. But yeah, I think it's I think it all sort of started to come together when it's like, well, I've got a few different skill sets and different things from sort of different areas of my life, and putting it all together in either track speed development, which is one, and then the pay on health stuff, which is the second.
How do you go working with your brothers? Everyone gets along well?
Yeah, no, we're really good. We just there's no. I think it would be different if it was our main financial sort of we've got to make heaps of money out of this and sort of like that. I think they talk about don't do business with family and friends sometimes because things can backfire. But no, we've got awesome relationships, and we all just if someone's not happy about something, we just say it. But we just get on with the job and sort of we just all chip in and get stuff done. So it's good fun. Many hands make light work. So
no, it's awesome. My dad and I run a gym together, and he's very hands-on. Like he's awesome with he should have been a builder or something like that. He's amazing with anything to do with like I don't know any of the gym fit out stuff. He's amazing with that.
Yep.
And then we have like the two separate skill sets, and it works well. It's always funny because people ask me, how do you go working with family? And it's funny hearing like it's fine. I love it. I wouldn't want to work with anyone else, but it's good that you also have that same experience.
Yeah. Well, I think it's different as well because it's like, well, if the company, for example, makes heaps of money, I'm really happy because then my brothers have more money as well. You know what I mean? Like I think it's
yes.
I've never been, and this is probably why I'm not so good at business. Like the selfishness that businesses get, and the you have to be selfish, and I get that whole side of things, and people get really, but money corrupts people so bad, and I was, I guess, fortunate enough early on. I built an app years ago, which was sort of about exercise testing and health and things like that, and it's still there, but I haven't really touched it for a while. But
what's the app called? Or you don't want to say?
No. Yeah, it's called exercise. It's called exercise testing. It's something that I use again. Sheer boredom. Going, why are people not doing this quicker? There's an easier way to do this. So doing submax testing, estimating VO2 maxes and things like that. It's very clinical, but it can be used in performance monitoring stuff as well. But I was lucky enough because I kind of got exposed to friends at the time who, were helping out build it. And as soon as money started to get involved, started to really change their personality and who they were. And I'm going, geez, that's weird. It's like, but if the company, if we make more money, aren't you happy? And it's like, no, they want it all for themselves. So I was sort of lucky in that sense to go, oh, okay, money really corrupts people. And I don't care. Like, I do not care. I mean, it would be great to have a lot of money, but if family and things over, it's like, what's the point? Like, who are you going to enjoy your money with? Like that's all well. And these people who chase money and burn through friends and workers like nothing, it's like, that's not for me. That's not the life for me. So if that means I'm not going to be good at business and super successful and a billionaire, I'll also be, at least I'll have my family and friends. So do you know what I mean? That's probably what matters more. So
couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
definitely. The last thing I want to touch on is just collaboratively working with with, say, the three of you, so you've got Louis, Jack, and yourself,
Yep.
and then
Yep.
even when I spoke to Jack, he was saying that it was one of the first times they'd collaborated on he had collaborated on a program for another client. Just him personally or whatever, reached out to kind of work with Mark, our athletes, kind of S&C, and make sure that, you know, everyone's working towards common goal. And I think that's so important, because it just means that whenever, you know, if I make a big change or you guys make a big change, certainly the sled has tanked majority of the things in his gym work, and that just means that stuff needs to be brought down to a level that's you know, just for him to kind of move through. But how valuable do you think that is, or how important that is, and kind of what has been your experience in the last few years, kind of, you know, obviously growing track speed development?
Yeah, look, I think you know, we've always sort of everyone's sort of got different people involved, and I think it's different as a track and field coach. Normally, you're not an S&C as well, so normally, even though a lot of them do it, you're not an S&C, and I think that's where the S&Cs go. Okay, we're the S&C, we'll do S&C. The track coach goes, I'll do the track. The biggest problem is when both think they can do both, and neither of them know what they're talking about in terms of what are the priorities for this athlete. And I think Mark's a good case. We'll get to him, but some of the other cases, in terms of how Louis, Jack, and I sort of all work together, and we've all sort of got our own roles. But I think I was lucky enough to see, you know, S&C sometimes can be very much about, you know, job justification in terms of, I have a client who is paying me all this money to get stronger, to get faster, but I've got to get, you know, my job is to get them stronger, more powerful in the gym, and hopefully they get faster. And, you know, and I've seen it before with athletes that are doing so much in the gym that then they get to the track and they're cooked. And you're going, well, what are you trying to do? Get good at the gym? Or are you trying to get fast? Where are your priorities? You know, like, and if that means at this time in the season, you have to switch but then it's like, well, if I'm paying this S&C all this money to do this, and I'm paying you as a track coach to do all this, you know, well, how does it all cross over? And I think, you know, that's why, you know, we're fortunate enough out at Bankstown where we you know, the club's fantastic, and the guys who run it getting government grants, and, you know, obviously lucky enough I know how to put gyms together. So putting all that stuff together for them, we create our own gym, so then we can do track and gym together. So then we can control most of the variables. Not saying that you can't work either way, because again, Mark is the perfect example how it can work perfectly. And we've got a few other athletes who have S&Cs through different companies and things. But it's just about having that relationship, about going, what are they coming to see you for? You know, and if they're a team sport athlete, well then, yeah, maybe the speed stuff can take a bit of a backseat, because, you know, although I'm biased and I think speed is obviously the most important thing, but it's like maybe they can go with a bit of fatigue or this and that. But it's like, if you're a sprinter and your job is to get faster, but you're coming into these sessions with neural fatigue because you went and did stuff just before, are you getting the best for the athlete? And I've always said, it's like, I don't really care about people's egos or what they think is right. It's like, what is the best for this athlete? And if that means that they have to drop back on all the gym stuff just to get the track stuff, or the other way around, whatever it is, that's what we've got to do as coaches. And I think that's always got to be in the forefront of people's minds. And Mark's a good example. You know, it's like if the sleds are starting to tax him in the gym, well, then it's like, well, that, you know, it's probably what he needs, you know, to do sled.
100%.
And it's just about adjusting accordingly, and everyone's sort of talking, making sure that everyone's on the same page. And if everyone's on the same page, and I think it's usually ego that gets in the way when people think that you know, that they're being undermined by someone else or something like that. And it's like, oh, I don't have time for any of that. It's like, you're either on board, we're all on the same page, we're moving forward, no one has hurt feelings, and just always put the athlete first. And if they're first and everyone else comes second, well then, you know, you shouldn't have an ego, because what you're doing is not more important what the athlete needs. So yeah.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, definitely. The primary outcomes need to be addressed. And yeah, with Mark, the primary outcome is not power clean. It's not doing tempo running on the third step. So
Yeah,
no,
yeah, pretty
100%.
much. And they're the things where you just go, well, I think, and I definitely had that as an early sort of even clinician working clinically or with sports. What are the priorities, and what's the junk that you don't need? And if there's a bunch of junk in there that you don't need, like if you're doing gym sessions that are 2 hours long and you're expecting the athlete to then turn up the next day at the track and field venue to actually do something, it's like, oh man, they're going to be cooked. Like I think we sequence so many exercises and how people program, and there's all these things in there, and you're going, that's great, it looks good for the client in the gym, but how does that impact the other stuff that they need to do that week? And I think it's like, well, maybe at certain parts of the season you can, but then you're going to have to start stripping it back, and whatever that looks like is a little bit different. But yeah, I find it a little bit too much, and we've all done it. We've all been stuck doing it, justifying our jobs by putting enough in the program so the client feels like they're getting something out of it. But in the ideal world, sometimes you just want to give them even less. Just to make sure that they're not overloading or doing something wrong. So yeah, we're always definitely been there and trying to be aware of it at all times. But yeah, minimum dose stuff, that's what we want.
Yeah, 100%. Mike, thank you so much for your time. Do you have, I can put your links for Pay on Health, Track Speed Development in the description below, and then the app exercise testing.
Oh wow.
No.
Too many things from a long time ago.
Far out, mate. You've got quite the resume. No, it's awesome. It's been lovely to chat with you. If you if there's anything you would like to promote, I can put in the links below.
That's all good. I think if we'll keep it to the track speed stuff, I think that's important. But yeah, I think some of the stuff that hopefully we release soon, with the GPS software and things like that, I think it would be pretty cool if people can get around it and get on board. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Anytime.